You talked about the efficacy of these vaccines being super high. Is that surprising to you?
Very surprising. Yeah, I think the whole scientific community would agree that nobody saw these numbers coming.
Is anyone alarmed by that? Did somebody overplay? Like, is this throwing an election where they went, oh, look, 130% of people showed up?
No, I think that what we're looking at is the progression of the understanding of vaccinology, virology, the ability to produce a new technology that actually works significantly better than, what we've done in the past and is, safer. And it's because we understand these things in a way that we just didn't really before.
Is it a question of I'm now protected forever, or is it a question of mass rollout so that we provide herd immunity, which we'll get to in a second, for enough people that we can kind of beat this virus down? Or is this a one and done or two and done?
This is actually another really interesting statistic that came out of the findings from Pfizer. They had a small amount of the people that were enrolled that had already had COVID. It wasn't enough to make statistical inferences, but it was enough for them to find out that of the small amount of people that did have COVID previously and then got vaccinated, some still did get the virus again during the trial. And more of those were in the group that was not vaccinated, which may indicate, and we cannot say this for sure, but it may indicate that the vaccine is more effective than naturally occurring immunity.
I don't know enough about epidemiology and virology, and I know that isn't necessarily your field, but how concerned should we be? I hate asking that question. How afraid should you be about this coming back like the influenza year after year?
So I may not be an epidemiologist by trade, but I am, could be considered a virologist. I had, several years in the vaccine field.
I'll shut up. Glad you're here.
So I would say that there is obviously concern. One of the things that we can compare this to is things like the common cold, where you do get regular mutation, but what we've seen is a similar virus throughout this entire outbreak. The biggest concern right now is that if it enters the population of other organisms, that can cause more mutation. And as in Denmark, where they had to cull the entire mink population.
Well, and how many people do you know who raise and harvest mink? I don't know any.
The entire population of Denmark, apparently. It's 1% of their GDP.
Yeah, no, it wasn't quite, but I think it's like 0.0. Anyway, that was a bold move, by the way. Good job, Denmark. That was some swift action. But the point that I'm trying to back up your point there about a zoological jump being, even if that's an unlikely event, it's not likely it can't happen unless it has the exposure. So it took somebody who was a mink farmer getting coronavirus and bringing it to the mink for that to even happen. And if there's not a lot of people in the world who farm mink, if we can contain this thing, that certainly will limit the ability of the virus to do that. Is there any way? So I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say, barring anything super surprising in the findings in the next tomorrow and in the next week, that you feel fairly comfortable getting this vaccine, one of the vaccines.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to stress that, scientists, anytime a scientist says that they're willing to do something like this, you have to remember that they're not making money off of this vaccine. They're not a part of the business who is making that vaccine specifically, right? We are a part of the same community as everybody else. We're just, we have the experience to look at the data specifically, and we're just as skeptical as everybody else. I came into this, if you listen to my early episodes of the coronavirus conversation, we were very explicit about the fact that if the data was not done right, cue the Russian vaccine, we would never take it, right?
What about Talk to me about the Russian vaccine. What do we? What do you mean?
Yeah, so let's talk about Sputnik. That's what they call the Russian vaccine, and they published their data very, very early, without ever stating that there would be a protocol, without ever doing a phased trial of said protocol, and then all of a sudden they said, "Hey, we have data. Check it out," and they published it in the Lancet, and very prestigious journal.
Yeah.
And because it is COVID, it meant that scientists in the public had the ability to take a look. So if you were to go into your local middle school and ask every kid, what is their favorite food, you're going to get a lot of tacos, pizza, burgers. And the total number of kids that says that is going to give you some list of numbers. If you then go to the next middle school, you're going to get similar numbers. You're going to get similar statements, but those numbers are going to be just a little bit different. Well, if you look at the data for the Russian vaccine, those numbers aren't a little bit different.
Wow.
You see graphs in which somehow their numbers line up exactly. And it's, we talk about the 1 in 12 billion chance where you'd have to go to another galaxy to find another O.J. Simpson. That's the chance of that happening that we're looking at.
They found a whole school of them, huh?
Yeah.
So probably if there are problems with this 50 pages of data, we've got, really motivated, uneducated, but motivated people that'll find these anomalies, as well as, everyone else on the planet. What happened to that vaccine? Where is it now? Or was that just like, yeah, never mind, we're just gonna, sorry.
No, so that's the best part. So this is actually not an uncommon scenario. Sometimes a scientist copy and pasted the wrong thing, right? So what you do to fix that is these concerned scientists sent a letter to the Lancet and they said, hey, please publish the raw data so that we can, refute this, or we can fix this issue. The Lancet got a hold of the Russian scientists and said, hey, this is a concern. Can you publish the raw data? And this was the response.
That was the raw data.
So all essentially what they said was the data looks good, or the data is good.
Data's fine. Stop asking questions. You'll go commit suicide by jumping out a window and shooting yourself in the face twice.
It was an easy answer that they refused to provide.
What would you tell people who are on the fence, who are concerned? How would you assuage their fears, and what would you do? What would you say to try to convince them to take it if that was a goal that you have?
Not only would I take it, I will take it, and it's because of the importance of establishing herd immunity. And I know that this word or this phrase got tossed around a ton in the last year, and it's very, very misunderstood. When people talk about herd immunity, they think if we have 10 people in a room and one of those people has cystic fibrosis, let's all go get the disease and that cystic fibrosis person can die. And now we have herd immunity. And that's not how it works.
We've heard herd immunity in Sweden, I think was the big one. Did that work? Are they still doing that?
I feel like, again, I would direct you to my podcast, but
I'm setting you up.
No, it did go very poorly, and if you look at the numbers, a large percentage of their population within the nursing home died. And so, a lot of people don't have grandparents anymore in that country.
Because they just decided to do nothing. How does doing nothing contribute to herd immunity?
So the idea there was they had this skewed sense of herd immunity that I described earlier, which is just, let's everybody get the virus, the vulnerable population will die, and then it'll be over.
If I have some medical reason that not to take a vaccine, and I'm not looking at everyone in Oregon with their I don't want to medical reason.
Immunosuppressed people is probably the best person you can list. A person who doesn't have the ability to develop that immune response is the person who can't take that vaccine. So by getting the vaccine, you protect them by them not having a source to get it from.
So they can't take the vaccine, so you have to. This has been one of the annoying things about COVID and 2020 in a lot of ways, that it's really laid bare some of the selfishness in a lot of people and the ways that that's developed. Take mask wearing, for example. The basic clinical physics about wearing a mask is that it better protects. If you are an asymptomatic case of SARS-2 or the coronavirus, and you're wearing a mask, it will protect other people from you infecting them more than them wearing a mask will. So the idea of making this a personal responsibility issue where everyone can just look out for themselves, even from the mask level, doesn't work, because I can wear a mask all day long and it will only offer me a small fraction of the percentage of the protection than if an infected person were wearing theirs. I can't protect myself to the same level that they can protect me from them. So how much of a population has to have immunity to provide protection for those who can't get that immunity?
If you look at measles, which is a highly contagious virus, something like 95% of the community needs to be immune to ensure that there's no spread, which is why we saw an uptick in certain places after the movement started by
Oregon,
a monster known as Andrew Wakefield.
Yeah.
But in some cases, polio, for instance, it's 80%, right? So it's different depending on the virus itself. It's called the RO value. Essentially, it's calculated by the number of people that any one person who has the virus can infect. That's the main part of the calculation. But it also includes the amount of people that receive antibodies from their mother, also the number of people who, get the, exposure any other way. So all of these types of things go into the calculation, but the main value is that RO value, which is based on how many people can one person tend to infect. We still, right now, don't have an entirely accurate 100% R naught value for this virus because we don't know enough about asymptomatic people, and we just don't have enough people tested to truly nail down everything about this virus.
So if the vaccine turns out to be safe, and you'll know if it's not, people in the world, you should get it, because the other only way to get herd immunity is essentially that everybody gets the virus and the at-risk population that is protected by everyone getting the virus are whoever's left. Got it. Which is not protecting anyone. I mean, so I was thinking of an analogy for that. I did listen to your podcast about herd immunity, and what I was thinking of was an actual herd. If you have a bunch of gazelles and there's a hungry lion, the gazelle that is less able to run or whatever is the most vulnerable to that lion. And that herd can line up and surround that individual and protect that person, that individual, that herd member from the lion, or they can let the lion eat it. And then that lion's not hungry, which technically makes the herd immune. But that's not what we're talking about. Right.
Yeah, that's survival of the fittest.
Yeah, that's just nature, the way things work. I'm trying to think of if I had a vector to talk about my mom.
It's not a bad thing to sort of end on, to talk about that you have a particular understanding of this virus because you've been affected by it personally.
Well, so in talking about that a little bit, we talked about mask wearing and protecting vulnerable populations. And, I know that you know this, but my mom wasn't necessarily in a vulnerable population, though she was 71. And the fatality rate of this virus is extremely low, depending. But the older you are, it rapidly increases, hundreds and hundreds of times. And for some medical and family reasons, she had to travel, and had to travel through states where there were no mask mandates, and people are not paying attention to the public health guidelines, and they have some of the highest infectivity rates in the country. And unfortunately, my mom contracted coronavirus and died. So if people out there in the world, this is still a nebulous concept to you, because you don't know anyone who this has affected. Granted, you don't know me, but you're looking at me. I am a person who lost a family member to this. So if you're saying this is inconvenient, or I don't want to take this because I don't know enough about, I have unanswered questions, or I don't know enough about vaccines to be comfortable taking this, I hope that can help motivate you. That if your grandma and grandpa is not still living, if your parents aren't still alive, your friends are. And this is not a nebulous concept to some of us. The people that you're going to protect and the people who are going to be protected by others getting this might be very important to you. So if that helps you get your questions answered, if you still have questions and are uncomfortable about this product, do the research. As I was listening to on your podcast, somebody made a great point about the difference between skepticism and sort of negative, fragile worldview certainty. I have this opinion that this is something that I don't want to do, or I don't trust, or I know more than this thing and nothing can convince me. But oftentimes we hear people who take those positions defend those positions by saying, well, look at the data. So I would encourage anyone to look at the data. And if you don't understand the data, give me a call. Give Danny her a call. Find somebody who does understand it, and find somebody you trust who understands it to explain it to you. Explore these things. Be a skeptic. Ask good questions. That's what this entire channel is about. But then follow the answers. So if you need motivation to do that work, just think of your mom. On that note.
One of the things I do want to add is, one of the things that we want to do on the podcast is provide an outlet for understanding of science. I think that the community can understand science better than scientists are allowing them to do, if they just get science from people who aren't journalists, who aren't people with a bias agenda, and instead get it from a group of scientists who have no, financial basis for even doing what they're doing. All they're doing it for is healthy scientific skepticism.
You're trying to humanize or break down the divide between the expert and the layman. And I think that's a good idea. I think that there seems to be this us versus them mentality in so much of our lives these days. But really the difference between an expert or a scientist and someone who's trained in a discipline is the training. And they don't sacrifice their empathy or compassion or feelings, or they don't have to pay that up front to become this thing. They've just put in some work. I'm sure that you all still care about the same things. So, and thank you for being willing to help. I've learned a lot from your podcast. I heartily will recommend it to anyone. There are some great episodes on this topic. And so if you are one of those people who doesn't know a lot about this stuff, including myself, I watched them to brush up on this, and I learned so much. Who's on that podcast with you? It's yourself, with your background, and who else?
We try to take the standard sort of curious mind and bring them in, and we've done that by bringing in a good friend of mine that used to be my physical trainer in the gym. His name is Shanti, and brilliant mind, but doesn't have classical training as a scientist, and he just does a great job asking questions, and and then we bring in several experts that I have a personal connection with a lot of them, and we talk specifically to them so that I can help sometimes bridge the gap between Shanti and the experts, and be able to sort of be that go-between for some of the doctors that we've had on, and help make some of this make a little more sense.
Sounds like you have a wide representation for the things that you're tackling. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it so far. I'm looking forward to listening to more. I'm hoping to work with you again. You've done some really amazing research on 3D printing and bioethics and bioengineering stuff. And I really want to get into that later on for happier times and happier topics. But I think this is a really important thing to talk about. So do you have anything else?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I mean, I think your video series has been absolutely incredible. You do really, really great research into topics that, you're don't have, specific training in either, but you do an incredible job of the research itself, and really finding information that is not only valuable, but relevant.
Well, it means a lot coming from you, man. So thanks a lot. We'll catch you next time. And thanks for watching, y'all. All right, everybody. This is actually a cut down version of the full interview. You can watch the whole thing. It's a much more in-depth exploration of this, and it's on our channel's Patreon page. You don't actually have to be a patron to watch it. That's just where the link is living. But if you do enjoy the channel and you're able to help me continue to make this content, please join on up. I didn't do this in the last couple episodes, but I'm going to this time. If you learned anything, please click the little thumbs up, like button, consider subscribing, share this around the net, make comments. Thank you so much for watching. Much love to all my amazing patrons, and I will see you all next time.